President-elect Donald Trump delivered his first response to the tragic attack on Bourbon Street in a Truth Social post this morning. He's also using the post to make claims about the attacker that we have not heard backed up yet by law enforcement sources, some diverging from what we've heard from law enforcement sources. Elena Trine is live in West Palm Beach with the latest from the president-elect and his team. Elena, what more are you hearing right now about what's happening inside the president's team?
Well, Phil, I was told that Donald Trump has been receiving regular updates on the situation on the ground in New Orleans. He is being briefed on this by a source familiar with the matter. But I want to read for you what Donald Trump posted this morning in reaction to everything that's unfolding down there in New Orleans. He wrote, quote, "Our hearts are with all of the innocent victims and their loved ones, including the brave officers of the New Orleans Police Department. The Trump administration will fully support the city of New Orleans as they investigate and recover from this act of pure evil." Now, as you mentioned, Phil, Donald Trump also kind of commented on the crime rate in the United States. I'm going to read this for you too as well and then explain a bit. So he said, quote, "When I said that the criminals coming in are far worse than the criminals we have in our country, that statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and the fake news media, but it turned out to be true. The crime rate in our country is at a level that nobody has seen before." Now, to be clear, we actually have some new reporting from our colleagues Evan Perez and Priscilla Alvarez, and they are reporting that the suspect in Wednesday's deadly New Orleans crowd attack was a U.S. citizen, according to a source familiar with the matter as well, telling that to our colleagues. So, look, I think, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered here. Officials have not really released additional information on the suspect, but he is a U.S. citizen. So that part of Donald Trump's statement kind of speculating about the suspect's identity, we're told is not true. He is a U.S. citizen. But Donald Trump, of course, weighing in and saying that his incoming administration will do what they can to help with this investigation, Phil.
All right, Elena Trine for us live in West Palm Beach. Joining me now is CNN's chief law enforcement analyst and former police chief of Washington, D.C. and former Philadelphia police commissioner, Charles Ramsey. Charles, I'd like to avoid going down the rabbit hole of picking sentences that aren't necessarily accurate or trying to ascribe political motivations when we don't know them, and focus instead on this is kind of an unsettling time where an administration is about to leave. A new administration is coming in. Both administrations pledging their full support to New Orleans, to law enforcement. Does that create any difficulty on the ground, kind of being in this transition phase for federal resources, for what local officials are able to do from an investigative perspective?
Not really. I mean, when you set aside people using an event like this for political purposes, as far as law enforcement is concerned, the FBI is always there for us. The ATF is always there. The state police are always there. Our focus is on solving crime. The focus is getting to the bottom of what took place. That has nothing to do with politics. That's just policing. And so this will have absolutely no bearing at all on this investigation.
When you look at what we know about the investigation up to this point, both what we've seen in terms of the video, what we've gotten from updates, what we've gotten from reporting from our colleagues Evan Perez, Priscilla Alvarez, and others, what's your sense of where things stand right now in terms of what law enforcement officials actually know and what they need to learn in the hours ahead?
Well, I think they know a lot more than we know right now, because the feds do not use the term terrorism lightly. So they've got some information that really causes them to now feel comfortable saying that this was an act of terrorism, because they would be going by the guidelines and the law, the federal law that really covers that sort of thing. So having said that, there are a lot of things going on right now. First of all, we don't know the name of the suspect, but I'm sure they do. And so there are search warrants being executed, maybe in New Orleans, maybe places in Texas, certainly that vehicle that was used. They're going through a lot of video to find out more about information so they can debrief them and really get to the bottom of this.
The use of a vehicle as a weapon, and a weapon that creates, obviously, both tragedy and horror, as we saw overnight. We see it more in places like Europe and foreign countries than we've seen it as much here at home. How does law enforcement prepare for something like this?
Well, I mean, it's difficult, but you do the best that you can, and that's why. And again, this isn't being critical of the New Orleans Police Department at all. Everyone does the best they can. There are a lot of events taking place around the country because of New Year's yesterday, and some perhaps use techniques that others don't use. We learn from one another. But one of the things you do to at least prevent a vehicle from being used is barriers that can withstand an impact of a vehicle. Now, it's my understanding they have bollards there, but those bollards were being replaced. They were actually upgrading the infrastructure. It's scheduled to be ready in February, probably in time for Mardi Gras. But that leaves a vulnerability for New Year's Eve. It leaves a vulnerability for other types of things that might happen on Bourbon Street or elsewhere once that is no longer there. So what do? In addition to the kind of barricades you saw, trash trucks, police cars, whatever you can to block streets so that a vehicle cannot go down there, as long as you have crowds of people. And we've all been to Bourbon Street. I mean, it's not that wide a street. And when you get this huge concentration of people. If a vehicle gets in there, you've got a serious problem. And so they would do what they can to try to block it off to prevent a vehicle of any type being able to get in. So what we need to know is, was that in place earlier? Which is why now it's 3 o'clock or 3:15 in the morning, and some of that was removed, which made it more vulnerable, and this person knew that. Or was it ever there? We just don't know the answers to that, but that vehicle got in there, and that's something that really departments across the country are going to be reevaluating their security to make sure that they take this into account. If nothing else, copycats.
Have you seen, to that point, and with an acknowledgement of the information that we don't have right now, have you seen anything that leads you to believe that there was more advanced planning, that there was a more expansive effort underway before the attack actually happened to prepare this attack?
Haven't seen it on video, but video would really reveal, because they got video cameras everywhere down in that part of the city. So you would be able to clearly see whether or not, more than likely, it would have been vehicles blocking the street. Could have been concrete barriers, but concrete barriers are difficult to move. And there are legitimate reasons why a vehicle would go down that street. You've got bars, you've got restaurants, you've got delivery trucks. But if you've got a vehicle there that's actually, with personnel in it, they can move out of the way and let authorized vehicles in and then close it off again. I don't know if that was in place at midnight, for an example, when you had the larger crowd versus 3 o'clock in the morning. I also don't know their personnel strength. Many departments in this country are understaffed. So I would imagine many of the officers that were used last night had to be double back and be there for the Sugar Bowl tonight. And so you would leave them at some point in time so they can get some rest and then be deployed again the next day. I don't know the answer to that. I would certainly understand if that was the case. There was still a lot of police officers on the ground. The question is whether or not there was adequate steps taken to avoid having a vehicle be able to enter Bourbon Street from any place.
Yeah, certainly one of the questions that'll need to be answered in the hours ahead. Chief Charles Ramsey, thanks so much.